and welcome to this week's edition of SCLC Today TV, of course, with our president and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr., who is wearing today the official Southern Christian Leadership Conference shirt with Dr. King's emblem on it. Dr. Steele, were you wearing that in Cleveland where you were this week, raising fuss? Or getting in good trouble?
I wear it everywhere I go. I wear it everywhere I go, and raising fuss and raising sand. Yes, you know.
What's going on in Cleveland, sir? Why were you there? What's the issue that brought you to Cleveland and got you so upset?
We have a situation there, Maynard, dealing with Sherwin-Williams, the international paint company. They're building a 36-story skyscraper, 36-story skyscraper, and it's going to enlighten downtown Cleveland, but it's not going to enlighten African Americans, black contractors getting first-tier contracts. We always have to be the ones who get the substitute or the subs in terms of contracts, and those days are over. So we're challenging Sherwin-Williams. They are international. They are known. They've been in business for over 155 years. Did you hear what I just said? 155 years they have been in business, and it's a slap in the face to the African American community. It's time out for people of color sitting around in an economic development opportunity, dealing with in a capitalistic society, and we don't get the contracts, and we're certified and qualified. That's why I was there, and I'll be back there next week.
Now, of course, you well know the company fired back in an article saying you were there because some preferred contractor didn't get all he wanted, one individual. You're saying, as I hear you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, that black folks aren't getting the top tier contracts for this building, right?
Absolutely. You're talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. We're talking about partnership. But when you get past there, you're talking about subcontract. We're talking about bringing a first-class tier 1 partnership to the table with an African-American company. You're talking about in the neighborhood close to $1 billion, $800 million going to be spent. And guess what, Mr. Eaton? The money is coming from the federal government, the state government, and the local government, from the cities within the metropolis of Cleveland, the state government, and the federal government. So what I'm saying and what I'm telling Sherwin-Williams, if you don't do the right thing, we're going to make sure that the Department of Justice, the DOJ institution within the federal government, will observe what you are doing, and that would hurt the city in terms of bringing about the infrastructure and the federal dollars to your city. You're dealing with public money. Even if it was private money, it's wrong, because African American buy paint, we build houses. If we don't build the houses, we buy the houses. This is something that's been historically discriminatory in the American society of the contract business of building buildings and skyscrapers.
What are they saying to you, sir? Are you there? Newspaper articles, speeches. You were adamant about this should be corrected. What are the paint companies saying back to you and others?
Well, we actually had a civil rights rally right there at the site that they're going to build this complex that's going to cost in the neighborhood anywhere from $800 million to $1 billion. And we've sent out via email, via drop-off letters. We've called them. My assistants out of Cleveland have made the approach that the international president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that Dr. King co-founded, wants to meet with you. He came to town to resolve the issue. And guess what? No response.
No response. What's next, Dr. Steele? What's next? Now, someone asked, is this civil rights? Is it economic rights? How do you gauge this in terms of your leadership? What do you call this effort?
It's civil rights, economic rights. It's unjust opportunities for people of color to be involved and sit at the table. I even told them in Cleveland, if you don't have enough tables, not enough chairs at the table, then we'll bring a folding chair. I've brought many folding chairs to many conferences and ended up resolving the issue. So we call it discriminatory practices in the construction management venue of doing business in America. That's what it is called.
You're going back to Cleveland next week to address this so-called injustice that you see and you're outraged about, correct?
That's correct. I'll be going back to Cleveland. I'm envisioned, Mr. Eaton, I'm envisioned to bring some contractual type of equipment, dump trucks and tractors and the heavy lifting equipment, the vehicles that is a necessity in what I call earth movers that bring about the demolishing of the current site where you have to develop and tear down old buildings in order to create and erect a new one. It's going to take some earth movers. And you're talking about those type of vehicles that are tractors that we will have the black contractors drive around, park it at the headquarters, and block the street. That's what we'll contemplate.
Well, you talk about earth movers. Just this week in Richmond, Virginia, the Robert E. Lee statue was removed. It was erected in 1891, a symbol of civil rights. A symbol of the South and the Civil War. Your thoughts about what that means? Is it just symbolic, or does it really mean something?
Well, first of all, it's a package. Sure, we don't need to forget the history of what Jim Crow did to us, what slavery did to us. But the dismantling of Robert E. Lee and other Confederate leaders in terms of the statuette of what they represent need to be in a museum. But we need to teach. We need to teach the historicity of what they stood for, but in a museum, not out elaborating and applauding and creating a hero type of imagery for these type of people when they were absolutely and completely brutal in their treatment of African Americans, colored folks, Negroes at the time, and we out here calling them heroes. It's asinine, it's ludicrous to think that we're going to sit around and continuously let people run over us, disrespect us, and bring about opportunity where we can be continuously looked upon as less than being human. That's basically what the autocracy aspect of what that represent. When I say autocracy, let me explain. The autocrat of bringing about the demolition of an individual or race in terms of the human specimen. It's being dictated that you are subhuman, and that's what's been represented for many of years.
Explain something to many of our listeners, because I've heard younger generations say, well, there's a Black Lives Matter movement that led to some of this taking down issues and civil history, racist symbols across the country. I suggest it's a long hand of SCLC and other veteran civil rights groups that led to this awakening. Am I wrong? Was it Black Lives Matter or what you and others have done?
Well, it doesn't matter about who get the credit. What matters is that this is nothing new. I went to New Orleans 10 years ago on 2 or 3 occasions, addressed the city council about dismantling the Confederacy right there in downtown New Orleans. Guess what? It came down maybe 5 or 6 years later. But SCLC was on the case and went to other cities, went to Jackson, Mississippi, and talked about the flag. See, but you got to implant and embed these type of scenarios and thinking and talking points to people to stir them up and get them to recognize we're doing something wrong here. The flag came down in Jackson, Mississippi, didn't it? But it didn't come down the same day or the next day or 72 hours or even a month after we demanded it come down, but it came down. So this fight been going on for many of years. The flag in Alabama, the Confederacy came down. In Georgia, it came down with State Representative Tyrone Brooks leaving that charge, and the flag emblem was changed. So, it's ludicrous for anyone or any organization to try to take full credit for the civil rights movement.
You got to plant the seeds, right? You got to do the work early on.
The seed, when you plant the seed, it doesn't happen overnight. When you plant the seed, you got to nurture it. You got to water it. And when you plant the seed has been there without your even seeing it. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It's there, but you don't see it. But it will grow.
Now, there's still one thing we did see, we were horrified to see 20 years ago, was the 9/11 terrorist attack on a collapse of the South Park and other places, helicopter crashes. 20 years ago, 9/11. I know you vividly remember it. And what does it mean today, you think?
What it means today, we need to know the facts. America is just as guilty. And many people don't, America just as guilty. We give money to Saudi Arabia, okay? Saudi Arabia gives the money to the terrorists. And people don't know that. That's why we have this show, Mr. Eaton, so we can enlighten folks. What I'm saying, we're going to take a strong stand on America declassifying what took place 20 years ago and call the duck a duck. If it's quacked like a duck, it's a duck. And if it barks like a dog, it's a dog. So let's call it what it is. Saudi Arabia was involved as a country in giving the money to these terrorists, and they eventually targeted America, and these are supposed to be the allies to our country.
You're saying America triggered its own tragedy?
I'm saying that America has to play a part in what took place 20 years ago, because Saudi Arabia was the element of the venue of the terrorists came from Saudi Arabia, and it's known that the country itself takes the money from America and give it to the terrorists because they are afraid of the terrorists themselves and say, go get somebody else.
Finally, sir, as a grandfather and a father, COVID-19, a new variant, is ripping across America again. Here we are again, hospitals full, people suffering, people dying, and of course it impacts poor and people of color more. Your thoughts as we leave this week's edition?
Well, Maynard, it's a sad commentary and a sad day in America. I think about history in terms of polio. I understand the Tuskegee experiment. I'm one of the first who came out and said that America was totally involved in experimenting with African-American Negro men at that time for 40 years in terms of the syphilis case. Wanted to know if it's go untreated, what would happen. They said they were given the vaccine to eliminate or to remove or eradicate the disease or the virus from these black men, but they were only giving them water. It was not the vaccine because they were studying black men. Black folks always been the most studied group of ethnicity of people in the world, always studying us. So what I'm saying is that we got to study the situation in this country. I did my own study on the vaccine, and I came to the conclusion that we need it. I went back to the polio. I went back to measles. I went back to the mumps, all of these things. I went back to TBs, tuberculosis, and it all took a vaccine to eradicate it.
But Dr. Steele, early on now on this program, you said, yes, I got the vaccine, but I'm not going to tell others what to do. Are you urging folks listening, our SCLC members, to get the vaccine now?
You didn't tell the whole story. I said I got the vaccine because I did my research. I studied it for myself. And I said, for others to do the same as I did, read, listen, talk to folks who are authoritarian in the field of the medical research. That's why I got a doctor. I got 2 or 3 doctors, and I talk to them. I know nurses. I got RNs and nurses in my family. You need, but I know some people who in the medical profession who still refuse to take the vaccine.
Right, exactly.
But the point is,
they don't take it. You're right.
You can't be lazy, Mr. Eaton. You got to do it for yourself. You got to
your life's at stake.
For yourself. Your life is at stake. Yes, I'm the first one who had the nerves and the courage to come out and talk about the Tuskegee experience, or the Tuskegee experiment, or the Tuskegee testing of African American who had syphilis, and they thought they were getting a vaccine, but they were getting water because they wanted to study us. You don't let that prohibit you from living and having a quality of life health-wise because that experience took place. It happened 40 years studying the African American male or men who had syphilis. 40 years, but you still have to do your own research. I did mine, I tell others, observe, study, do your own research. And I did my research, and I took both of the shots. Moderna.
I listened to you. I always listen. I did too, because after I listened to you, since you did the research, I benefited from your research.
Thank you so much. I didn't know you were listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening this week to this week's edition of SCLC Today TV, and join and pray for our leader, Dr. Charles Steele Jr., as he heads back to Cleveland to work for economic justice amongst the contractors there. I'm Maynard Eaton. This has been This Week with SCLC Today TV.